Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. I'm so glad you're here. It's Dr. Ginny here, and we're doing a live training today on mindsets because our mindsets can really interfere with our healthy eating and weight loss efforts. I just in the past week had some moments where I thought, now how did I go from I'm not going to do this to I'm just doing this and I don't even stop and think about it. One of the things I've been working on recently is stopping coffee by noon because I was really having trouble sleeping. So I've been working on, okay, I have a cup of coffee in the morning, maybe two, half-calf coffees, and then I stop. I don't have it with lunch anymore, which often tends to be pretty late. So it's just been amazing since I made that intention, how often I just head to Starbucks or I just start making that second cup of coffee that I used to have with lunch before I even think about it. I've been able to, for more than a month now, keep from having that afternoon cup of coffee, but it's been really, I just find it fascinating to watch how our minds work. So I've been figuring out how to change my mindsets, and I've been helping clients and friends and family with mindset changes so that they could really eat the way they intend to eat. They could eat healthy and release excess weight. And I'd love to help you with this 14-day challenge. How this is going to work is for 14 days, we're going to do a, hey, Mark, good to see you here. We're going to do a challenge where you can join me every day for 14 days. It's going to be Monday through Saturday from April 1st through April 17th. And people can join at any time. So feel free to tell your family and friends about it because I really designed this experience to be transformative for people. So, and they sort of, I'm kind of new to Facebook Live, and one thing they tell you is it takes about a minute for Facebook to find the people to get them to join the live. So you have to tap dance a little. So that's what I've been doing. Anyway, so you probably heard the phrase, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. And there's so much truth to that. There's so many biases and so many shortcuts in the way that we think. And that's for a lot of really good reasons. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today is what are some of the mindsets that hold us back when it comes to healthy eating and weight loss? And what are some of the ways that you can change those? And other days will be more devoted to some of the strategies for changing those mindsets. But today we're really going to talk about what are some of the mindsets that derail our healthy eating and weight loss, and where do they come from? And how do they sustain themselves? Like, why does this happen to us? So I'm just going to check my notes over here periodically. Let's see. Yeah, so it's important to become aware of the mindsets that we have around eating and weight, and to be so that we can be able to start changing some of them. So yeah, they can sort of make or break our healthy eating intentions. So how do we develop these mindsets? And what purpose do they serve? We've been developing mindsets about eating since before we had any awareness that we had mindsets, right? Since we were infants and toddlers, we started noticing the things that are put in front of us as food. And we noticed we were kind of trained how much you eat and how frequently you eat and what you eat and how it's prepared. And like in my family, everyone had their own salt shaker. And so I learned that salting your food, even before you taste it, it's important. It's part of what you do when you eat. And probably other people learned something very different, like we don't have salt at all, or we only salt our food, after we've tasted it and see if it still needs salt. So, and you'll hear those people say, I had this meal the other day and it would have been really good, but it was just too salty. And I'm thinking, how can anything be too salty? So we get these biases that build up in our childhood before we even have a chance to think about it. We learn, certain foods are pleasurable, and we learn certain foods don't feel good or don't taste good or don't have a texture that we like from the time we're really pretty little. I have a memory of having a babysitter when I was a child, and she was one of the most obese people I ever met. I never knew anybody that big. And 50, 60 years ago, people weren't as big as they are now. That's really been changing. So anyway, this babysitter was a wonderful person, but she had a different attitude about food. And so she made cream of mushroom soup for us for lunch one day. And I thought that was the grossest, weirdest, most disgusting thing I'd ever seen. And I was not going to eat it. And I'm a pretty stubborn person. Like, you can't make me. So she made me sit at the table with the soup in front of me and would not let me leave the table. And so my mom got home from work at 5:30 or something, and I'm still sitting there with a cold bowl of cream of mushroom soup in front of me. And my mom, she didn't go off on her or anything, but she said, we don't do that. They don't have to eat things that they don't want to eat, and we certainly don't punish them by making them sit in a chair for 4 or 5 hours because they're not eating something. So if that, maybe that's something that happened to you, like you're supposed to clean your plate, or you were told, take just a few more bites. Like I've watched a lot of parents do that with children. And it's like this belief that children need to be forced to eat, otherwise they won't get enough nutrition, which isn't true. Children will naturally eat enough if it's available. I mean, if they can get to the food, they'll naturally eat enough to sustain themselves. And they probably, when they're little, they probably need to eat more frequently than we do. So they don't want to necessarily get super, super full at any one time. You think about babies and, they can only take in so much before their stomach says, that's too much, I can't do anymore. And you kind of regret it if you try to force them to keep eating after that, right? So let's see, what else did we learn? Oh, you might have learned that you need to eat your vegetables in order to get dessert. And so that lesson kind of teaches us that the dessert is the good food that everyone wants. And vegetables are sort of the punishment food that you have to eat in order to get the dessert. That's really not a very helpful lesson. And, once we become able to choose our own food and buy our own food, we're going to buy all the desserts, right? Like, I'm not going to eat vegetables anymore. They're the punishment food, and I'm not a child anymore, and nobody can make me eat my vegetables. And that's a really distorted attitude. Vegetables are something that humans have eaten throughout the millennia. They're one of the best sources of nutrition that really fuels our body and makes us really healthy and prevents heart disease and diabetes and cancer and things like that. So teaching children when they're little that vegetables are punishment food and sweets are the food that everyone would eat if we could eat them all day, really not very helpful. I know that's one of the lessons I really had to unlearn as I got older. Another thing you can learn about vegetables is they're very mushy. Like I remember when I was growing up, seems like, most of the vegetables that we were eating came out of cans. And so they started out mushy, and then our parents cooked them to death and they got even more mushy. And so the texture wasn't good and the taste and flavor wasn't good. And so it really didn't seem like the best food to eat. So I will have people say to me, I don't like vegetables. And I'll say, well, all vegetables, you don't like any vegetables, and no matter how they're prepared. Maybe it's a matter of learning some preparations, some vegetables that you do like and some preparations. Yeah, vegetables are one of those things that it's really important for us to eat quite a bit of because it's where we get a lot of nutrition from and a lot of medicine for our bodies. So finding ways to eat vegetables is important, but a lot of us grew up with these attitudes of anti-vegetables. And I don't know if you know this, it's very interesting to me, but when people say they don't like vegetables, it could be that they're one of the people born with a gene that makes them very sensitive to bitter flavors. Because a lot of vegetables have bitter flavors, and we have a certain amount of caution when we taste something bitter, like this might not be good for me. But often the foods that are a little bit bitter are some of the most nutritious foods we can eat. So there's this kind of fine line. The people who are very sensitive to bitter foods tend to eat less vegetables, tend to like vegetables less, and find it more difficult. So in my program, I help them especially find the vegetables that they'll really love, because you got to love it or you're not going to eat it. And I help them find ways to prepare those vegetables. Anyway, I didn't mean to talk this much about vegetables at this point, but I get a little geeked about it. Let's see, I wanted to tell another story. I worked in a Montessori school. I directed a Montessori school for infants through kindergarten for about 4 years on the board and 5 years as the executive director. And I remember going, one of the first days I went there just to observe and watching the children in the toddler room, which is about 1-year-old to 3 years old, preparing for lunch. And it was such an emotional experience for me because the children were so excited getting their lunch ready. They were really participating in preparing the meal in the ways that they could. They were cleaning the table and setting the table, and they were washing their hands and you know, somebody was putting bread in a little basket. They were setting their own places for lunch. And one of the things we know is when children get to participate in preparing the meal and even setting the table and things like that, they're a lot more likely to eat really well and to eat a diversity of foods. And if we let them serve themselves the amounts of the different kinds of foods that they want, they're a lot more likely to eat it. I always remember a child who, his family was wanting to, his auntie was wanting to put food on his plate in certain amounts. You know, you got to try this, you got to try that, you got to try this. And the child was just getting more and more anxious and upset because the foods were touching each other and he didn't even know if he liked that food. And now it's touching a food he does like. And if we let them put their own food on the plates, they really eat a lot healthier and a lot more diversity. They don't need to be forced to eat vegetables. And that's part of what had me emotional, is the children were eating like this quinoa salad and fruits and vegetables and, you know, grilled chicken. They were eating all these foods that parents think they won't eat. Happily, really, really happily, really with a lot of gratitude and with a lot of intention, and they were eating it on their own. And it just, I didn't really know until that day that even though I'm a child psychologist by training, I didn't really even know 1 and 2-year-olds could be that capable and that confident and that courteous and considerate. But when we give them the chance to do a lot more of it by themselves, they do a lot better. So anyway, we don't need to teach them that vegetables aren't good for them and sweets are the preferred food. Let's see. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the beliefs or attitudes that you developed about food as a child? And some of them may be really constructive and healthy for you, and some of them maybe get in the way. So join in, comment. What are some of the food attitudes or eating attitudes or beliefs that you developed as a child? All right, so you might notice that some of the attitudes you developed as a child about eating are beneficial. Like my parents did not teach me you have to clean your plate. They're like, you know, they didn't comment on how much I was eating, which was good because until I got close to menopause, I really didn't have any trouble with my weight. I ate very healthy and very well. Menopause really changed things for me, and I went into an early menopause because I had been doing fertility treatments. So really for about 15 years, I was struggling with weight, and it was getting worse and worse and worse. And you've probably heard my story, and I'm sure you'll hear it again. So let's see, some fundamental principles about what we learn about eating. One is, you know, we have a pleasurable experience with a food. Like, I mean, many of us have seen a young child being given something sweet for the first time, and they sort of taste everything with a, well, let's see. And then they taste something sweet and they go, yay, that's good, right? And they want more of that. So that trains our brain. Okay, pleasure, ding, ding, ding. Remember that, get more of that. That's one of the things that we learn. And some of it can be context. It can be about the taste or the texture. Sweet things give us a sense of pleasure. Certain textures can be very pleasurable to us in our mouth. And also the context. So let's say first time you had pumpkin pie, the context was very pleasurable. There was a lot of family love involved. You know, it was on Thanksgiving and people were really happy with each other. And then you might have a really positive feeling about that food. Or conversely, maybe you had a Thanksgiving dinner with pumpkin pie. I say that because we don't have pumpkin pie every day, right? But we have it on Thanksgiving. But say it was a Thanksgiving where people were really upset with each other and somebody had just died or somebody was in a fight with somebody else. And so there was a lot of tension. And maybe that food that you don't usually eat gets associated now with that tension. So you just never like pumpkin pie after that because of the associations. So a lot of our reactions to food have to do with pleasurable experiences or context, or they have to do with pain or unpleasant experiences. So you can remember maybe tasting something that was really bitter or something that had a texture that felt gross to you. And you develop a feeling, a drive to avoid that food. So we have these experiences. Some of them have to do with context. Some of them have to do with taste. Some have to do with texture. And they kind of drive us either towards avoiding that or wanting more of that, seeking more of it. So we can overgeneralize these lessons. So you might have had green beans in the mushy state that came out of a can, and you decided, I don't like green beans. And that's an overgeneralization, because you didn't like green beans prepared that way. It doesn't mean you wouldn't like them in other ways, right? I remember once going to a reception, and I almost never throw up. May not want to hear about this, but that day I did. Something that I ate at this reception gave me food poisoning, and I was quickly in the bathroom, needing the toilet. So that was not fun. Now you're going to remember any experience like that, and you're going to have an association like, okay, it's a certain food that I ate there that caused that. It may or may not be that food that caused it. It could have been something that happened yesterday, but you're going to develop an association to what you believe caused that reaction. That's just natural. Our brains want to conserve energy. Our brains want to make sure we don't have to think about everything so hard all the time, because there's plenty of things we have to think about. A lot of our eating becomes very habitual. We don't want to have to think about it. This is one of the tricks when you're really trying to get to a point of releasing excess weight and really developing healthy eating habits. They have to become habitual. You can't have to think about it in a really intentional way forever. That just won't work. So let's see. What else did I want to say about this? So we overgeneralize these lessons, and that can be beneficial for us in a lot of ways, saving energy, but it also has some negative qualities. So like I tried kale once and I didn't like it, so I don't like kale. That can be a negative. If we decide I don't like any of the things I once had a negative reaction to, we could narrow what we eat to things that are not diverse enough. It's really important for us to get a diversity of foods in order to best feed our gut microbiota. And this is something they've been learning a lot more about. But in order for us to be really healthy and to have a lot of great energy and to be able to have a great immune system and to have a great mood, we need to be eating a diversity of foods and keep as diverse microflora in our guts as possible. When we really narrow the amount of foods that we eat, or we narrow them to a lot of really highly palatable, highly processed foods, then we're feeding bacteria in our gut that aren't healthy, and we're narrowing the diversity of flora in there. And that really interferes with our health, our immune systems, our mood, etc. And that's just negative associations, but our positive associations can go too far too. So when we talk about loving sugar or having some kind of food that gave us a lot of pleasure, you think about sitting down and eating those foods. It might be chips, or it might be beer, something that gives the pleasure part of our brain a rush. And our brain says, get more of that. And so what we often tend to do is sit and eat, go way past one serving, right? I sometimes will let myself have bags of veggie chips when I'm really hungry and I'm have to go home and prepare dinner. And the thing about that is, if I get a bag that has 5 or 10 servings in it, I'm going to eat them all. It doesn't matter, until they're gone, I'm going to keep eating them. So that's one of the ways that we get really in trouble too. And when I talk about you're going to have maybe an approach attitude toward a food or an avoidance attitude toward a food, do you ever have both? You have that conflict of, you really have this approach attitude about a food and you have an avoidance attitude. Like, okay, that's a food that, like chips, like that's something I just know I'm going to overeat. I'm going to feel sick. It's not going to feel good in my body. I'm going to not be happy with what's happening in my gut after that. But I have this attraction to it because of the pleasure that it gave, right? So our brain is all about concern. Energy, but it also leads to some problems, right? So if you ever had, like I grew up in a really small rural Midwest town. And so I came out of there with a lot of biases and prejudices that I didn't even have awareness of, because there were so many kinds of people I'd never even met before. So I would have these ideas about, okay, that person who looks like that is going to be like this. And I'm so glad that I had the openness to get the chance to meet different kinds of people and realize, okay, these people, none of these people fit into the little boxes that I had them in my head. the same thing happens with our eating and our food and our approach to eating. Is we develop these prejudices and biases, and we want to find ways to open up a little bit more, because we want to be able to eat the foods that we weren't necessarily trained are the best foods to eat. You know, that isn't sort of the experiences that we went through. So the thing about limiting beliefs and biases is they become self-fulfilling prophecies. Another way that our brain conserves energy is not only do we have these beliefs, but we seek evidence proving our beliefs over and over and over. And so it can be really a challenge as a human being to decide, you know, I'm going to really strive to approach new situations in a learning and a growth kind of attitude. I don't want to go into situations and just see what my biases drive me to see, because that's how the conservation of energy happens in our brain. Is, you know, if I believe, I don't know what, if I believe all tall men are mean and gruff, then I'm going to see evidence for that everywhere I go. I'm going to look for, okay, there's a tall man, I bet he's mean and gruff. And then because I'm thinking that, I'll see something that confirms that attitude. So they become self-fulfilling prophecies. A couple of ways that this can really interfere with your weight loss. Well, one could be a set of unhealthy beliefs about yourself. So you might have a belief about yourself that, you know, I'm just not a disciplined person. I just can't say no to myself. I just can't follow a structure. And people really do have differences in whether they love structure or they hate structure. But and you may have had the experience of setting goals and then not being disciplined enough to achieve them. But to say to yourself that I'm not a disciplined person makes it about a fixed state. Like, this is how you are. You're not disciplined. And when you put it to yourself that way, then there's no point to working on it. But actually, discipline is a habit. It's a skill that you can build. And if there are some goals that you're not meeting and that's frustrating you in life and you're missing out on certain things in life, you can decide, I'm going to work on this, at least in this area. So for example, you know, when it comes to healthy eating, this is important. My health is really starting to suffer. So I'm going to really work at discipline and structure when it comes to eating healthy. So let's see, other unhealthy beliefs about yourself can be, you know, I'm not a good person, or I'm not the kind of person that good things happen to. I'm an unlucky person. Most of us have some unhealthy beliefs about ourselves, or I'm a loser. And, you know, we might say, you might find that you say really mean things about yourself when you're going through hard times. And those beliefs are important to become aware of, because they become self-fulfilling. You'll keep finding ways to make it true, just so that your brain can conserve energy. So part of what we're going to do in this challenge is work on becoming more aware of the unhealthy beliefs, or the limiting beliefs that are holding you back, especially when it comes to your healthy eating and weight loss. Let's see. So what's a limiting belief you have about yourself that causes you suffering? And I think it'd be really helpful now to identify at least one. Think about making notes about it, a limiting belief that holds you back or causes you suffering in life. And it could be about yourself, or it could be about others, or about the world. For example, one limiting belief that I see when it comes to weight loss and healthy eating is the belief that, look, the only foods that taste good are bad for me, and the only foods that are good for me don't taste good. So it's really unreasonable to even ask or suggest that we should be able to eat healthy, because that means we're eating things that don't taste good. That belief is not true. It's not that there's not something to it, but it's not true, and it causes suffering. It makes you just give up. And when it comes to being able to eat healthy, if you're like me and you're over 50, this belief is really, and eating in a way that goes along with that belief is really starting to cause some serious problems, right? I had brain fog. I couldn't think clearly at all. I was walking like a 90-year-old woman. I was 60 pounds overweight. And so the chart at the doctor's office said I was obese. I didn't feel like I was obese, but I certainly felt overweight and very much slowed down. And My blood sugar was elevated. I was pre-diabetic. I was having to take antidepressant for nerve pain every night. I was having a lot of pain. I was taking ibuprofen every day. I did that for decades, and that is not good for our bodies and our systems and our health. So many things were problematic because I was letting myself eat in ways that weren't healthy on a regular basis. And part of my mindset was, I did 9 out of 10 things well today. I can give in on this one thing. Really, if I broke it down, there were probably 100 things, and I did 90 out of 100 things well. Well, doing 10 things poorly to your body, as far as eating and drinking every day, can really add up to becoming a big problem. And it was. So, hope you've identified a limiting belief you have that causes you suffering, and you can see how it's holding you back in life. Take a little time with that, work on that a little bit. Let's see. What about the unhealthy belief that no good deed goes unpunished? That makes you not want to do anything nice, do anything kind or generous, right? So we we have a bad experience and we overgeneralize and make it into a story that's that big and that discouraging. And those are the kinds of things we want to change. So over the course of these 14 days, I'll help you learn how to change those beliefs. And we'll work on beliefs that especially relate to healthy eating and weight loss. But these ideas that you're going to learn and these skills that you're going to learn about changing your mindsets can apply to anything in your life that's holding you back. So I hope that you really make use of it. Let's see, some limiting beliefs that hold us back in areas of life. I don't know how many of you know my master's thesis, I studied marital expectations. And I found out that there's a set of expectations that really lead to divorce or to at least suffering in marriage. And one of them is the belief that if the other person really loves you, they should be able to read your mind. You shouldn't have to tell them what you want or need. They should just know because they love you and they just sense it. And that's one of those beliefs because people are not actually good at reading each other's minds. We may read each other's emotional states to a certain degree, but we don't know what the other person's thinking or needing or wanting if they don't tell us. So that belief is associated with failure in marriage and with sadness and misery in marriage and couple relationships. So that's just one example. So I want to tell you that some of the beliefs, the common beliefs and attitudes that get in the way when it comes to healthy eating and weight loss, and I'll look at my notes so I don't miss them. We're not going to be able to address all of these in a 14-day challenge, but I think we'll be able to get into them enough that you'll be able to identify at least one or two that are holding you back and work during these 14 days to at least change that one mindset, and that will really help. So one mindset that I found that gets in the way for people, I've identified about 18. One of the most prevalent is it should be easy. It should be easy to eat healthy and to stay slender. It shouldn't be so hard. I mean, it should be human nature, and we should be able to follow our gut instincts and just eat in a healthy way and stop eating before we become overweight or obese. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that one tomorrow. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on that one. But that one is really, well, you can see it would lead to discouragement because it's not easy. It's easy in some ways, and in other ways it's not. It takes some attention and some effort for a while to learn to eat in a way that's really healthy and to make that a habit that you can live with. Eating is very, very habitual. So we need to find habits for eating healthy that we can really sustain. So that attitude just leads us to give up. Like, oh, it should be easier than this, so never mind. All right, another attitude or belief is that's very common. This is one that I had is I deserve this. I deserve this treat. I deserve this pleasurable eating experience. I remember I had this habit of gorging at night, eating like a queen, I say. And it was becoming an every night thing. And it was really adding to my weight, to excess weight. And I would look at what I was eating and it was, like one thing I love to do is just go and get a loaf of bread that you take home and bake with multi-seed, multi-grain, a whole loaf, I mean, kind of a small one. But then I'd have brie cheese and I would have red wine and I would have olives and it was just delicious. And then I would have dark chocolate and hope I'm not triggering anybody. But this habit was definitely part of why I would continue to gain weight. And that was causing me misery and it was causing me illness and, making me walk like a 90-year-old woman at 55. So So I decided I needed to change it, and I would start the morning. I'm having a hot flash. Isn't that pretty? Anyway, so I would decide in the morning, I'm not going to do that tonight. I'm going to eat some really reasonable, I'm just going to have a salad and some water. It'll be tasty. It'll be fine. It'll be good. There's no problem. And I'd feel really confident about it in the morning. But by the evening, driving home from work after a stressful day, and my willpower had been just decimated by by experiences of the day, I'd be saying to myself, I'm going to have that. I want that. I need that. It's important to me. I'll do this tomorrow. So it's like, okay, what happened there? I had one mindset in the morning and a different mindset at night. And it's almost like I felt like two different people. So we're going to talk a bit about that mindset, because that's a really common one that derails us. So we will change how we think. We'll work at changing how we think about what we deserve in life. Because I know for me now, I deserve to be able to walk well, and I deserve to be able to feel good in my body and to be able to move and have great energy and have great mental clarity. I'm not all about, I deserve this treat anymore. I deserve something a lot bigger than this momentary short-term pleasure. So that's one of the beliefs that tends to hold us back a lot. And I'm going to wrap up in just a minute here. Another one is, I don't have time. I don't have time to prepare and cook food. I really need to get the most fast, convenient foods, and that's really important to me. And that mindset can really hold us back from eating healthy and eating in a way that allows us to have a really healthy weight. Another one is, I need to clean my plate. I just can't leave food behind, or I can't throw food away. That attitude or belief can hold us back. Another is later. Like, I will deal with my health and my healthy eating and weight loss later. Now is just not the time. That's one that holds us back. And another one is, I'm really unique. There are things about me, my health, my eating preferences, my health conditions, the way that I tend to approach change in life. I can't, even though other people can achieve this weight loss or this healthy eating, I can't do it because I'm unique. So I wonder if any of those beliefs or attitudes resonate with you, and I encourage you to make some notes about that. Which of these beliefs seem to be beliefs that get in your way when it comes to healthy eating and weight loss? And let's work on them over the next 14 days. And I don't know about if you can see this, but when you change some of these beliefs and attitudes, not only can you change your habits and change your body and change your life, but it frees up so much energy. Like, having this conflict of, approach avoidance conflict about a certain food can really drain your energy like that. Starting the day with, I'm not going to do this, and ending it with, I am going to do this, was kind of exhausting. And I sort of had no idea how much that was draining my energy day after day. So when you recognize these mindsets and you transform them, you can change how you eat, and you can also experience just a great release of energy. And your body can also start to release the excess weight. So it's a wonderful confluence of things that happen when you get your mindset going in the right direction. So yeah, you're on the path to getting slender for good if you're starting to recognize how mindsets can either make or break your healthy eating and weight loss efforts. And because you can change these limiting beliefs. And that's what we're going to work on over the next 14 days. And I really look forward to doing that with you. As Ella Fitzgerald said, it's not where you come from, it's where you're going that counts. And so you may have held these beliefs for a long time, for decades, and feel like, okay, those really led me down the wrong path, and they really got me overweight and ill. And it's frustrating, but we can change this. So tomorrow we're going to work on the fundamental skill for transforming those beliefs. And remember, if your friends or family would be interested in doing this, invite them to join us. They just go to slenderforgood.com/14-day challenge, and they can sign up. It's not too late at all. They can absolutely join in and get benefit from this challenge as well. So stick with me to day 14 to get your free gift, and have a wonderful day, and I'll see you tomorrow.